Check this out, BCM Ritter here, bringing you another Commander deck tech, and today I am revisiting my all-time favorite Commander build, Muldrotha the Gravetide. This is a graveyard strategy where it has many synergies of putting cards into the graveyard and reanimating all sorts of different permanents and casting spells from your graveyard. So let's get right into this. The main mechanic that we're going to use for this build is the dredge mechanic. The dredge mechanic is a replacement effect where anytime you draw a card, you'll put the top card of your library into your graveyard, where the number of cards is based off the dredge number. So we have the best one possible with Golgari Grave Troll. This has dredge 6, so whenever we draw a card, we're not going to draw the card, we're going to mill 6 cards, and then we're going to return Golgari Grave Troll back to our hand. Now we have Stinkweed Imp. This has dredge 5, so we're going to dredge 5 cards. And it's also a very good blocker because it's a 1/2 with flying and death touch. So any amount of damage that would be dealt to a creature destroys that creature. Now we have Golgari Thug. This has dredge 4. If Golgari Thug would be put into a graveyard from the battlefield, we can put any creature card from our graveyard back on top of our library. Now we have Hermit Druid. Hermit Druid is probably the best creature that's going to put the most amount of cards into our graveyard just by activating it. Because when you activate it, you're going to reveal cards from the top of your library until you reveal a basic land. We're only running 3 basics in the entire deck, so this is going to maximize the amount of cards that we're going to put into our graveyard. And if we have a very limited amount of cards in our library, we have a automatic win condition. We have Thassa's Oracle. For those of you who are very prominent in Commander, you're no stranger to Thassa's Oracle. This is a great way to win the game on the spot very quickly, because when it enters the battlefield, you're going to look at the top X cards, where X is your devotion to blue, and you get to put one of them on top of your library and the rest on the bottom. And if X is greater than or equal to the number of cards in your library, you win the game. But if our library has no cards in it, anytime we draw a card, if it has no cards in it, we win the game instead. Now we have some creatures that are going to utilize playing as many lands per turn as possible. First up, we have the best mana dork in Commander. We have Delighted Halfling. She'll add a mana of any color that we can only use for legendary spells, and that spell cannot be countered. So Muldrotha will be uncounterable. Other legends won't be able to be countered either. Now we have Azusa Lost But Seeking. We can play 2 additional lands per turn. Dryad of the Elysian Grove, we can play 1 additional land each turn, and lands are every single land type. That way we can produce whatever color we need. Now we have the iconic Oracle of Moldiah. We can play 1 additional land per turn. We have to play with the top card of our library revealed, but we can play lands from the top of our library. Now we have a new one. We have Ice Till Explorer. This guy does everything we need him to do. We can play an additional land on each of our turns. We can play lands from our graveyard, which is very important, and has landfall. So anytime a land enters the battlefield, it's going to trigger and we mill a card. Now we have the Gitrog monster. This is a very good blocker as well, being a 6/6 with death touch. Every single upkeep, we have to sacrifice a land, or we sacrifice the Gitrog monster. But we can play an additional land on each of our turns. Whenever 1 or more lands is put into a graveyard from anywhere, whether it be sacrificed, discarded, or milled, we get to draw a card. So we're going to synergize our lands being put into the graveyard, thus triggering dredge because we're drawing cards. Another mechanic that we're going to focus on that really synergizes with everything is Evoke. Because most of these creatures that have Evoke is a alternate casting cost that has a very good enter the battlefield trigger. So we have Muldrotha. When it enters the battlefield, we get to draw 2 cards. So we're going to trigger Dredge twice. My personal favorite with Grief. When it enters the battlefield, we get to look at target opponent's hand. We get to choose a non-land card from their hand, and they have to discard it. Now we have Foundation Breaker. When it enters the battlefield, we get to destroy target artifact or enchantment. Now we have Uro, Titan of Nature's Wrath. The reason this guy is so good in this build is because he only costs 3 mana, and we can choose that permanent type with Muldrotha as creature. So when it enters the battlefield or attacks, we can gain 3 life, draw a card, and put a land from our hand on the battlefield. And because we're drawing a card, we're going to trigger Dredge. Now we have some powerful creatures that are going to synergize with all the other creatures we have. First up, we have Sidisi Undead Vizier. This is kind of a permanent demonic tutor, because when Sidisi Undead Vizier enters the battlefield, we have the option of exploiting, which is when it enters, we can sacrifice a creature, and if we did, we get to search our library for any card and put that into our hand. Now we have Spark Double. This will enter the battlefield as a copy of any creature or planeswalker on the battlefield, except it won't be legendary. And if it was a creature, it'll enter with a additional +1 counter, or if it was a planeswalker, enter with a additional loyalty counter. Now we have Hostage Taker. When this enters the battlefield, you get to exile target artifact or creature until Hostage Taker leaves the battlefield, and you can cast that card for as long as it remains exiled. Now we have Noxious Scarehulk. He's going to do a good job at destroying creatures and gaining life equal to the destroyed creature's toughness. Now we have probably the absolute best reanimate target ever printed, with Archon of Cruelty. Besides being a 6/6 with flying, whenever it enters the battlefield or attacks, target opponent will sacrifice a creature or a planeswalker, discard a card, and lose 3 life. We get to draw a card and gain 3 life, which will trigger Dredge as well. Now we have some creatures that are going to synergize with literally everything we're doing. We have Sylvan Safekeeper. That way we can sacrifice lands to give any creature Shroud. Just by sacrificing lands, you're going to trigger the Gitrog monster. Now we have Haywire Might. We can pay 1 green to sacrifice this to exile target non-creature artifact or non-creature enchantment. Now we have Spore Frog. That way, we can prevent all combat damage every single turn, and our opponents will never ever deal damage to us. Now we have Fauna Shaman. Fauna Shaman is going to be the best creature to go find any of these creatures that we need. So we're going to pay 1 green, we're going to discard a creature card, preferably a Dredge creature. Then we get to search our library for any creature and put it into our hand. Now we have Ledger Shredder. Whenever any player casts their second spell each turn, we get to connive. So we get to draw a card, which will trigger Dredge, and then we discard a card. But if the discarded card happened to be a non-land card, majority of the time this will be, we get to put a +1 counter on Ledger Shredder. Now we have Ramunap Excavator. He's going to allow us to play lands from our graveyard in case we don't have Muldrotha on the battlefield yet. Now we have Reclamation Sage. When it enters the battlefield, we get to destroy target artifact or enchantment. Now we have a very unique one. We have Vampire Hexmage. We can use this offensively and defensively. We can sacrifice Vampire Hexmage to remove all counters from any permanent. This is going to do a very good job at killing planeswalkers or dealing with your opponent's creatures that have a lot of +1 counters on it to make that creature bigger, or we can remove counters from a very certain land that I'll get to in just a second. Now we have Eternal Witness. In case we need to return any card from our graveyard, we can do that with Eternal Witness. Now we have Troll of Khazad-dûm. This is a large reanimate creature. When it comes out very early, most likely your opponents can't deal with it, being a 6/5, but it can't be blocked except by 3 or more creatures. So it's basically unblockable. But more importantly, it has swamp cycling. So in the early game, we can pay 1 colorless, discard this, and search our library for any swamp card. Now we have Titania, Protector of Argoth. We're going to utilize all our lands entering and leaving the battlefield. When she enters the battlefield, we get to return any land from our graveyard back to the battlefield. And then whenever any land is put into our graveyard from the battlefield, we get to create a 5/3 green elemental creature token. This also synergizes very well with the Gitrog monster. We do have a decent amount of planeswalkers that are really going to turn the tide of the game and take over everything. So first up, we have Grist the Hungertide. As long as Grist the Hungertide is not on the battlefield, it is a creature in addition to its other types, which means you can use Fauna Shaman to discard a card to go get Grist the Hungertide. But he'll enter with 3 loyalty counters on him. You can +1 him. We're going to create a 1/1 black and green insect token, and then we get to mill a card. And if we mill a card that happened to be an insect as its type, we get to repeat this process. This doesn't come up very often, but the only insect we do have in the entire deck is Ice-Till Explorer. Or you can -2 to sacrifice a creature to destroy another target creature or a planeswalker. And then -5, each opponent will lose life equal to the number of creature cards in your graveyard. Now we have my personal favorite, with Oko, Thief of Crowns. This card is absolutely filthy. He'll enter with 4 loyalty counters on him. You can +2 him to create a food token, which you can pay 2, sacrifice it, and gain 3 life. Or you can +1 him again, and then target artifact or creature will lose all abilities and become a 3/3 elk. Or -5, you can exchange control a target artifact or creature you control with target creature a opponent controls with power 3 or less. Now we have Narset Parter Veils. This is gonna really damper our opponents from drawing additional cards because each opponent cannot draw more than 1 card each turn. She'll enter with 5 loyalty counters on her. You're gonna -2 her, look at the top 4 cards of your library, and put a non-creature non-land card from among those into your hand, and the rest go on the bottom. Now, to prevent our opponents from searching their library, we have Ashiok Dreamrender. Spells and abilities your opponents control can't cause their controller to search their library. She'll enter with 5 loyalty counters on her. You're going to -1. You're going to mill 4 cards and then exile all cards in your opponent's graveyard. Because the only one that should have a graveyard is you. Now we have Tamio, Collector of Tales. She has a very good static ability where spells and abilities your opponents control can't cause you to discard or sacrifice permanents. She'll enter with 5 loyalty counters on her. You're going to +1 her, choose a non-land card name, and then you reveal the top 4 cards of your library and put all cards of the chosen name into your hand. The rest go into your graveyard. We can just keep +1ing her to put 4 cards into your graveyard, and then -3, you can return any card from your graveyard back to your hand. Now we have Tasha the Witch Queen. She'll enter with 4 loyalty counters on her, and anytime you cast a spell you do not own, you get to create a 3/3 black demon. You're going to +1 her, and you get to draw a card. And then for each opponent, you get to exile 1 instant or sorcery from their graveyard with a page counter on it. Then -3, you can cast any spell that have page counters on them without paying their mana cost. Now we have Jace, Wielder of Mysteries. Because we are a Thassa's Oracle deck, and we can win with Laboratory Maniac, this is pretty much another Laboratory Maniac effect, where if you would draw a card, if your library has no cards in it, you win the game. This is just another alternate win condition. He'll enter with 4 loyalty counters on him. You can +1 him, and you're going to mill 2 cards and then draw a card. And then -8. You get to draw 7 cards, which will trigger Dredge 7 times. And then if your library has no cards in it, you win the game. Okay, let's get into the artifacts. We have our Soul Ring, our Arcane Signet as our 2 mana rocks. Now we have Mesmeric Orb. Whenever any permanent becomes untapped, its controller will mill a card. This is going to be very punishing for your opponents, but very beneficial for us, because we want to put as many cards in our graveyard as possible. Now we have Altar of Dementia. We can sacrifice a creature and then mill cards equal to the sacrificed creature's power. If we have very large creatures, we can attack with them and then mill ourselves even more. And of course, we have Lion's Eye Diamond, which is hands down the most powerful artifact that's in this build. You're going to sacrifice Lion's Eye Diamond, discard your hand, and add 3 mana of one color. Okay, let's get into the enchantments. First up, we have Tortured Existence. We're going to pay a black, discard a creature card, and return any creature from our graveyard back to our hand. Now we have Exploration. That way we can play as many lands per turn as possible. This will give us another additional land drop. Now we have Sylvan Library. At your draw step, you're going to draw 2 additional cards, and then you can pay for life to keep those additional cards in your hand. This also triggers Dredge. Now we have some enchantments that are going to help us reanimate any creature. So we have Kaya's Ghost Form. You're going to enchant a creature or planeswalker you control, and then when the enchanted permanent is put into a graveyard or exiled, you get to return it back to the battlefield. Of course, we have Animate Dead. We can put any creature from any graveyard into play under our control, except it'll get -1/-0, but that doesn't matter. Similar to that, we have Dance of the Dead. This one's a little different because you're going to enchant the creature from the graveyard. It's going to be put into play under your control tapped with a +1 counter on it, except that creature won't untap unless you pay 2 during your upkeep. Now we have Necromancy. You can choose to play Necromancy as an instant, and you have to sacrifice the creature at the next end step. Now we have some removal enchantments. So we have Seal of Primordium. We can sacrifice this to destroy any artifact or enchantment. My personal favorite with Pernicious Deed. We can pay X mana, sacrifice Pernicious Deed to destroy each artifact, creature, and enchantment with converted mana cost X or less. Because Muldrotha does cost 6 mana, if we pay 5 mana into Pernicious Deed, you're pretty much going to blow up everything. Of course, we have Grave Pact. Anytime a creature you control is put into a graveyard, each opponent will have to sacrifice a creature. Okay, let's get into the instance. First up, we have Crop Rotation. As an additional cost, you have to sacrifice a land, but you can search your library for any land and put it on the battlefield. This is going to synergize really well with either Titania or the Gitrog monster, because you're putting a land into the graveyard from the battlefield, and you get the land you really need at the certain time you need it. Now we have Frantic Search. We're going to draw 2 cards, then discard 2 cards, then untap 3 lands. So you're getting the mana value of untapping 3 lands. You get to draw 2 cards, which will trigger Dredge twice. And then you get to put 2 cards that you need back into your graveyard. Now we have Vampiric Tutor. That way we can search for any card and put it on top of our library, and we lose 2 life. I like this as a very early game play to get my Dredger on top of my library in case I don't have one. Of course, we have Entomb. We can search our library for any card and put it straight into our graveyard. Now we have 2 cards that are going to go alongside with Thassa's Oracle to help us win the game on the spot. So we have Demonic Consultation and Tainted Pact. For those of you who don't know how this combo works, if you cast either Tainted Pact, you exile cards from the top of your library until you reveal a card that has the same name. Because Commander is a singleton format, you're not going to reveal any card, so you're going to exile your entire library. Then the Thassa's Oracle will trigger and you win the game. Okay, let's get into the sorceries. First up, we have Life from the Loam. This is another Dredger. When you cast it, you can return 3 target lands from your graveyard back to your hand. And because we are a very prominent graveyard deck, we have Reanimate. We're going to put any creature from any graveyard into play under our control, and then we lose life equal to that creature's mana cost. Now we got some removal, so we have Toxic Deluge. We're going to pay X life, and all creatures get -X/-X. Of course, we have Windfall. Each player will discard their hand and then draw cards equal to the number of cards that were discarded this way. Okay, let's get into the land base. This is a very streamlined, fine-tuned land base. So we have our command tower, our reflecting pool. We have 3 fetch lands. So we have Misty Rainforest, Polluted Delta, and Verdant Catacombs. All the fetch lands are going to synergize very well with Titania and the Gitrog monster. Of course, we need the lands to go get, so we have Zygote Triumph. This will tap for Sultai mana, or if we don't need it, we can cycle it by paying 3 colorless and discarding it to draw a card. More times than not, we're going to cycle this. That way we can trigger Dredge. I can't stress that enough. Now we have our 3 shock lands. So we have an Overgrown Tomb, Watery Grave, and Breeding Pool. Now we have the 3 Surveil lands. The Surveil lands are absolutely critical in this build. When it enters the battlefield, we get to look at the top card and we can choose to leave that card on top or put it into our graveyard. So we have Underground Mortuary, Hedge Maze, and Undercity Sewers. Now we have the 3 Battle Bond lands. So we have Morphic Pool, Rejuvenating Springs, and Undergrowth Stadium. Now we have my personal favorite with the brand new Verges. They're kind of like remakes of the Tainted lands. So we have Willow Rush Verge, Wastewood Verge, and Gloom Lake Verge. Now we have the Check lands. So we have Hinterland Harbor, Drowned Catacomb, and Woodland Cemetery. Now we have a whole bunch of utility land, and the best one by far in this build is Cephalid Coliseum. For 1 blue, we're going to sacrifice it. We're going to draw 3 cards, then discard 3 cards. But only if there's 7 or more cards in our graveyard. But that's not going to be hard to do. Cephalid Coliseum is going to be the main engine for synergizing with all the dredge mechanics. And with the additional land drops every single turn, you can keep doing this ability as many times as possible every single turn. Now we have Dakmor Salvage. This has Dredge 2, and it synergizes very well with the Gitrog monster. Now we have the 3 channel lands. So we have Boseiju Who Endures. You can pay a colorless and a green to discard this and destroy a target artifact, enchantment, or non-basic land a opponent controls, and then they search for a land that has a basic land type. This also costs 1 less for each legendary creature you control. Now we have Otawara. That way we can discard this and return any artifact, creature, enchantment, or planeswalker back to its owner's hand. Now we have Takanuma Abandoned Mire. We're going to channel this. We're going to mill 3 cards, and then we can return any creature or planeswalker from our graveyard back to our hand. Now we have Shifting Woodland. This will enter tapped unless you control a forest. It'll tap for a green mana, but has Delirium. So if you have 4 or more different card types in your graveyard, you can activate this. And when you do, Shifting Woodland becomes a copy of any target permanent that's in your graveyard. Now we have Command Beacon. Because Muldrotha does cost 6 mana, and we're going to use Command Beacon to constantly put Muldrotha back into our hand so we can keep casting it. Now we have Glacial Chasm. When this enters the battlefield, we have to sacrifice a land. We can't attack, and all damage that would be dealt to us is reduced to 0. This is a great way to lock out our opponents from dealing damage to us whatsoever, and we can constantly return this every single turn. So we don't have to pay its cumulative upkeep of losing 2 life. Now we got a fun one. We have Thespian Stage and Dark Depths. These 2 combo with each other. The Dark Depths also works with Vampire Hexmage because Dark Depths will enter the battlefield with 10 ice counters on it. When all the counters are removed, you get to create a Merit Lage token, which is a 20/20 avatar with flying and is indestructible. We want to play the least amount of basics possible. So we have 1 swamp, 1 forest, and 1 island. And that was the revisit Commander deck tech to my all-time favorite graveyard strategy with Muldrotha the Gravetide. I really hope you guys enjoyed this build. If you guys have any suggestions on how to improve this deck, because every single deck can be improved in any way, but it is a very powerful deck. I'll leave the link to the Moxfield deck list for this exact build, like always. But let me know in the comments below if you guys have any suggestions. Be sure to like, comment, subscribe, share these videos. I will see you guys in the next one.